I still remember the moment my daughter collapsed on that piano stage. The way her fingers suddenly froze over the keys, the terrifying blue tint of her lips as she struggled to breathe, and my sister's whispered words as the paramedics rushed in. Perhaps this will teach her some humility. My sister had swapped my daughter's heart medication with sugar pills before her Juilliard audition, all because she couldn't stand to see my child succeed where hers had failed. My own mother knew and did nothing to stop it. They almost killed my 12-year-old daughter to satisfy their jealousy. They thought I would forgive them like I always had before. They were wrong. What they didn't know was that my father had left me a secret trust fund with a moral turpitude clause. Now I would use every penny to make sure my sister would end up working at the very mall she used to shop at. This is how I destroyed the family that tried to destroy my daughter. I still remember the moment my daughter collapsed on that piano stage, the way her fingers suddenly froze over the keys, the terrifying blue tint of her lips as she struggled to breathe, and my sister's whispered words as the paramedics rushed in. Perhaps this will teach her some humility. My sister had swapped my daughter's heart medication with sugar pills before her Juilliard audition, all because she couldn't stand to see my child succeed where hers had failed. I always knew Vanessa resented me. Growing up, she was the golden child, showered with our mother's attention and praise while I was constantly overlooked. When my Eva showed remarkable talent at the piano at just 5 years old, that resentment transferred to her. My bright, beautiful daughter whose only crime was being extraordinary. The morning of Eva's Juilliard audition had started with such promise. Her delicate fingers danced through warm-up scales as I fixed her hair, both of us giddy with anticipation. This was her moment, the culmination of years of practice and dedication. "Are you nervous?" I asked, pinning a final strand of her dark hair into the elegant updo. "A little," Eva admitted, "but the good kind of nervous, like butterflies helping me fly." I smiled, reaching into my purse for her medication. Eva had been diagnosed with a mild heart condition when she was 8. Nothing that would hold her back with proper management, just a daily medication to regulate her heartbeat during times of stress. 2 pills, 30 minutes before performance, I reminded her, watching as she swallowed them with water. "Doctor's orders." The knock at the door startled us both. Vanessa swept in without waiting for a response, our mother Patricia close behind her. I hadn't expected them to come. In all the years of Eva's recitals, they had always found excuses to miss them. "We simply had to support our little prodigy," Mother announced, her eyes critically scanning Eva's appearance. "Though that dress looks a size too small. You always did have trouble with proper measurements, Alexandra." I bit back a retort. Today was about Eva, not our family's endless power struggles. "The audition starts in 20 minutes, I said instead, checking my watch. "Eva needs to warm up." "Of course she does," Vanessa smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Such pressure for one so young. Not everyone is meant for greatness, you know." Her gaze flicked dismissively over Eva before landing on me. "Some of us have to learn that the hard way." I felt Eva stiffen beside me. "Eva is ready," I said firmly, "and she's going to be brilliant." The stage manager appeared at the door, informing us that the sound check was complete. I needed to speak with the technician about Eva's microphone placement, a minor detail, but one I wanted perfect. "I'll just be 5 minutes," I told Eva, gathering my purse. "Remember, deep breaths." "I'll watch your things," Vanessa offered quickly, her hand already extended. "Go handle your business." Something in her eagerness should have warned me, but 15 years of keeping family peace had trained me to ignore my instincts. I handed over my purse and hurried to find the sound engineer. When I returned, Eva was alone, practicing a difficult passage. Vanessa and Mother had gone to find their seats, she explained. Everything seemed normal. Everything was not. The Rachmaninoff piece began flawlessly. From my position in the wings, I could see Eva's complete focus, the way she lost herself in the music as her small fingers spanned impossible reaches across the keyboard. My heart swelled with pride. Then, halfway through, something changed. Her tempo faltered. Her fingers stumbled over a passage she'd perfected months ago. She paused, took a breath, and continued, but I could see rising panic in her eyes. When her hand suddenly clutched at her chest, I was already moving. By the time she collapsed at the piano, I was running across the stage, catching her before her head could strike the hardwood floor. "Call an ambulance!" I screamed, cradling Eva's limp form. "She has a heart condition!" The audience erupted in concerned murmurs. Paramedics pushed through the crowd. I held Eva's hand, whispering desperate prayers as my daughter's lips took on that terrifying bluish tinge. Through the chaos, I caught Vanessa standing back, eyes wide with what appeared to be shock. But there was something else there, a fleeting expression of satisfaction before her face rearranged into convincing concern. "Perhaps this will teach her some humility," she whispered to our mother, unaware that I could hear every word. At the Aharia hospital, the doctor's words confirmed my worst suspicions. The pills in her system were not medication at all, just sugar. If you hadn't recognized the symptoms so quickly, the outcome could have been much worse. I sat beside Eva's hospital bed that night, watching her chest rise and fall, monitors beeping reassuringly. My mother and sister had gone home after a brief performative visit. "It must have been the pressure," Mother had said, patting my hand with practiced sympathy. "Not everyone is meant for greatness, Alexandra." I had nodded, eyes downcast, the very picture of a worried mother accepting comfort. But inside, something had shifted. A lifetime of accommodating their cruelty crystallized into perfect clarity. I would no longer be their victim, and they would never harm my daughter again. My phone buzzed with a text. The family attorney, Charles Winters, requesting an urgent meeting about my father's estate. Richard Mercer had passed 3 years ago, leaving most of his considerable wealth in a family trust that Mother controlled. I had received my modest portion and expected nothing more. What could possibly be urgent now? With Eva stable and sleeping peacefully, I slipped out to meet Charles. The following morning, the elderly attorney had served my father for decades, his face grave as he slid a sealed envelope across his desk. "Your father instructed me to deliver this to you only if certain conditions arose," he said quietly. "I believe those conditions have been met." Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting and documentation for a second trust, one Mother and Vanessa knew nothing about. Far larger than the family trust, it had been established solely in my name with a moral turpitude clause that could redirect all family assets under my control if any beneficiary committed criminal acts. My father had known. Somehow he had seen through their perfect masks to the cruelty beneath. He had prepared for this, arming me with the power to protect myself and Eva when the time came. "Thank you, Charles," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "I will need your help implementing some changes." That night, I returned to the hospital with new resolve. I retrieved my purse, carefully extracting the tiny camera I'd installed months ago after several accidents with Eva's belongings. The memory card contained exactly what I needed. Clear footage of Vanessa opening the medication bottle, replacing pills with identical sugar tablets, then carefully resealing it. Premeditated, deliberate, unforgivable. For years, I had been the family peacekeeper, swallowing their cruelty to maintain harmony. That woman died the moment my daughter collapsed on stage. In her place stood someone new, someone with the power and determination to ensure they would never harm my family again. I stroked Eva's hair as she slept, my mind working with cold precision. "They thought they could break you," I whispered. "Instead, they've given me the reason I needed to break them." Eva's eyes fluttered open, finding mine in the dim hospital light. "Mom, are you okay?" "I am now," I assured her, smiling gently. "And I promise you, everything will be different from now on." Different indeed. Vanessa and Mother had no idea what was coming. They thought they knew me, the accommodating daughter and sister who always backed down. They were about to meet someone else entirely. Someone who would use every resource, every scrap of evidence, and every ounce of determination to dismantle their lives as methodically as they had tried to destroy my daughter's future. This was not about revenge. This was justice. And it was long overdue. For the next 3 weeks, I maintained perfect composure around my family. I accepted Mother's offers to help with Eva's recovery, while secretly documenting every interaction. I nodded sympathetically when Vanessa suggested Eva take a break from piano to focus on being a normal child, all while building my case. I hired private investigators using funds from my father's secret trust. Their findings exceeded even my darkest suspicions. Decades of Vanessa's financial irregularities came to light: embezzlement from the family business, tax fraud, misappropriation of trust funds. More damning still was evidence of Mother's knowledge and active concealment of these crimes. But most chilling were the documented incidents of previous sabotage aimed at Eva. The broken violin before a concert 3 years ago hadn't been an accident. The mysteriously damaged sheet music, the lost application materials for previous opportunities, all deliberate acts meant to undermine my daughter's success. "They're so transparent," Eva remarked one evening from her hospital bed, scrolling through yet another concerned text from her grandmother. "She wants to know when I'll be back to normal activities, as if piano isn't normal for me." I smiled, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. "What did you tell her?" "That I've already rescheduled my Juilliard audition for next month." Eva looked up, strength returning to her eyes. "They won't stop me, Mom." "No," I agreed quietly. "They won't." When Eva was finally discharged, I moved her to our lakeside cottage to recover. I cited her need for peace and quiet, but in reality, I was removing her from the battlefield before launching my offensive. The cottage had been my sanctuary for years, purchased with my own savings from my architectural firm. Neither Mother nor Vanessa had ever visited, finding it too modest and remote for their tastes. Now it became our fortress, a place to heal and plan. "Your mother canceled her plans again," Charles Winters informed me during one of our daily calls. The elderly attorney had become my most trusted ally, his quiet efficiency perfect for the tasks ahead. "She and Vanessa are growing concerned about your withdrawal." "Good," I replied, watching Eva through the window as she practiced scales on the cottage's old upright piano. "Let them worry. It's time for the next phase." That evening, I sent formal invitations for a family reconciliation dinner at Rossetti's, Mother's favorite restaurant. The response was immediate, both women accepting with transparent relief, believing the crisis had passed, that I had returned to my familiar role of family peacekeeper. They had no idea that reconciliation was the furthest thing from my mind. I spent the next week finalizing preparations with Charles and the investigators. Every document was in order, every piece of evidence cataloged and verified. The trust's moral turpitude clause was ironclad, its language specific enough to cover the exact crimes committed against Eva. "Are you certain about this?" Charles asked during our final meeting before the dinner. "Once set in motion, there's no turning back." I thought of my daughter's blue lips, of 15 years of subtle cruelty disguised as concern, of the calculating way Vanessa had opened that medication bottle knowing exactly what she was doing. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I told him. The night of the dinner arrived. I chose my outfit carefully, a severe black dress that said business, not reconciliation. Eva helped me with my hair, her fingers steady now, her strength returning. "Will you tell them I'm auditioning again?" she asked. "Among other things," I promised, kissing her forehead. "Don't wait up for me." Rossetti's private dining room glowed with candlelight as I greeted Mother and Vanessa with practiced warmth. Mother was resplendent in her pearls, Vanessa dripping, with the designer jewelry she prized above all else. "Eva couldn't join us?" Mother asked as we were seated, disappointment evident in her tone. "She's resting," I replied smoothly. "The recovery has been challenging." Vanessa reached across the table, squeezing my hand with theatrical sympathy. "We've been so worried about both of you." Throughout the appetizers, I maintained the illusion, sharing updates on Eva's recovery while steering conversation toward childhood memories. I watched them grow increasingly comfortable, shoulders relaxing as they believed the crisis had been averted. "Remember when Daddy took us sailing?" I asked over the main course, swirling my untouched wine. "Eva reminds me so much of him. That same determination." "Richard always did favor you," Mother said, the old bitterness surfacing briefly before. She masked it with a smile. "Though he would have cautioned against pushing Eva too hard. Children need balance. Speaking of balance, I said, my voice suddenly precise, I had the most interesting meeting with Charles Winters recently, about Daddy's other trust. The silence that followed was exquisite. Mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Vanessa's smile faltered. What other trust? Mother finally asked, her voice carefully controlled. The one you weren't meant to know about. I placed my napkin beside my plate and checked my watch. The one with the moral turpitude clause that activates right about now. On cue, the private dining room door opened. Instead of waiters with dessert, Charles Winters entered with 2 other attorneys and a court-appointed notary. What is this? Vanessa demanded, alarm replacing confusion. I opened my portfolio, extracting a USB drive, medical reports, and legal documents. This is consequence. With clinical detachment, I played the video on my tablet. Vanessa clearly tampering with Eva's medication before the recital. The medical reports confirming the substitution of sugar pills. The private investigators' findings of financial crimes stretching back decades. You could have killed her, I said, my voice steady despite the fire raging inside me. My 12-year-old daughter, your niece, and for what? Because she has the talent and drive you've always lacked? Vanessa's face contorted through denial, anger, and finally desperate pleading. It was just supposed to make her mess up a little. I didn't know it would affect her heart condition. Of course you did, I corrected coldly. You were there when she was diagnosed. You sent flowers to the hospital. Mother, recovering her composure, attempted to seize control. Alexandra, this is absurd. Whatever happened was clearly a misunderstanding. Was it a misunderstanding? When you covered up Vanessa embezzling from the family business? When you helped her hide assets from the IRS? I pushed another document forward. Was it a misunderstanding when you both sabotaged Eva's violin before her concert 3 years ago? Charles cleared his throat. Ms. Mercer, I've been authorized to inform you that as of 5 o'clock today, control of all family assets has been transferred to Alexandra under the terms of Richard Mercer's second trust. Both your monthly stipends have been terminated, effective immediately. Vanessa lunged for the documents, but I was faster, sliding them to the attorneys. It's already done. The trust's moral turpitude clause is quite specific about criminal acts against family members. We're your family, Mother hissed, her mask of maternal dignity slipping completely. No, I replied calmly. Eva is my family. You two are just people who share my DNA. I nodded to the attorneys who placed additional documents on the table. Restraining orders, I explained. You'll remain at least 500 feet from both me and Eva at all times. You will not contact us by phone, email, or through intermediaries. All communication will go through Charles. Vanessa began to cry, mascara tracking down her expensively maintained face. You can't do this to us. What are we supposed to live on? You might try working for a living, I suggested, rising from my chair. I hear it builds character. Mother's eyes narrowed dangerously. Your father would never have wanted this. No, I agreed, gathering my things. He wanted me to protect my daughter from people exactly like you. That's why he created the trust in the first place. As I turned to leave, Vanessa made one last desperate attempt. The family will never forgive this. Everyone will take our side when they hear. They already know, I interrupted, pausing at the door. The video of you tampering with a child's life-saving medication makes for compelling viewing. Check your social media. I believe the phrase persona non grata applies. The door closed on their stunned faces, muffling Vanessa's wail of outrage and Mother's cold threats. In the restaurant's main dining room, I paused, suddenly lightheaded with the magnitude of what I'd just done. 15 years of playing family peacekeeper, erased in one evening. 15 years of swallowing their cruelty, ended with surgical precision. Ms. Mercer? Charles touched my elbow gently. Your car is waiting. Thank you, Charles. I straightened. My shoulders. For everything. Your father would be proud, the elderly attorney said quietly. He always said you were stronger than you knew. Outside in the cool evening air, I took my first deep breath as a woman truly free. My phone chimed with a text from Eva. How did it go? I smiled as I typed my response. Exactly according to plan. 3 months passed like the turning of seasons. Inevitable, transformative, cleansing. I watched the systematic dismantling of my sister's and mother's lives with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. The first week after our confrontation at Rossetti's, my phone buzzed constantly with calls from their friends and associates. One by one, I answered each call with the same calm response. I can email you the video evidence if you'd like to see for yourself. None required a second viewing. Patricia's attempts to access emergency funds from the family trust were denied. Her appeals to the board members, old friends of my late husband, met with polite but firm refusals. The video evidence had circulated discreetly among their social circle, creating an invisible barrier that no amount of explanation could penetrate. Mrs. Mercer sends her regrets, but she won't be attending the charity gala this year, Charles reported, reading from the growing list of society events that had suddenly found Mother's presence inconvenient. Nor will she be chairing the museum fundraiser. How unfortunate for her, I replied, signing another set of documents redirecting trust disbursements. Please make sure the redirected funds go to children's arts programs in underserved communities. Vanessa's situation deteriorated more rapidly. Without her monthly stipend, her considerable debts surfaced like corpses in a thawing lake. Credit cards maxed, mortgage in arrears, luxury car repossessed from the country club parking lot during ladies' luncheon. A particularly satisfying detail reported by my private investigator. Ms. Mercer won't leave the premises, the manager of Neiman Marcus called to inform me one Thursday afternoon. She's insisting her account can't possibly be frozen. Tell her she's trespassing, I replied calmly. And remind security that there's a restraining order in effect if she asks about me or my daughter. Eva's recovery progressed steadily. Her strength returned, her fingers regaining their dexterity as she practiced for her rescheduled Juilliard audition. If she noticed the sudden absence of her grandmother and aunt in our lives, she seemed only relieved. I saw Aunt Vanessa today, Eva mentioned casually one evening, hands moving methodically through her scales. My head snapped up. Where? Did she approach you? Eva shook her head. She didn't see me. She was working at Nordstrom in the mall at the makeup counter. Looked pretty miserable. I permitted myself a small smile. Vanessa, who had never worked a day in her life, who considered retail beneath contempt, now selling cosmetics to women who had once been her social peers. The poetry of it was undeniable. Patricia proved more resilient, though no less affected. The first family heirlooms appeared at auction within weeks. First, the lesser pieces of jewelry, then progressively more significant items. The Monet that had hung in the family dining room for generations. My father's collection of rare books. Eventually, the vacation home in Aspen hit the market, selling well below value for a quick cash infusion. Their attempts to reach me grew increasingly desperate. First came the formal legal challenges, easily deflected by the ironclad language of my father's trust. Then the emotional appeals through mutual acquaintances, met with polite but firm refusals. Finally, the pathetic handwritten letters slipped under my office door, tear-stained and self-pitying. All went unanswered, all were documented and added to the ever-growing file. In the 4th month, Patricia made her most audacious move, approaching Eva after school, deliberately violating the restraining order. She was waiting by the music room, Eva reported, more annoyed than upset. Going on about family forgiveness and second chances, I recorded it all on my phone, like you taught me. The violation resulted in a stern judicial warning and the addition of GPS monitoring anklets for both Patricia and Vanessa, a humiliation that effectively ended Patricia's remaining social engagements. Some might say you're being excessively harsh, Charles observed during one of our regular meetings. I regarded the elderly attorney calmly. Some haven't watched their child nearly die from deliberate medication tampering. Charles nodded, conceding the point. As Eva's rescheduled audition approached, my investigators reported increasing desperation from both women. Patricia had begun selling furniture from the family home to cover property taxes. Vanessa had been forced to surrender her membership at the country club where she'd spent most of her adult life cultivating social connections. They're planning something for the audition, the investigator warned, Both made separate calls about the Juilliard event date. I simply nodded, unsurprised. Let them come. We'll be ready. What neither Patricia nor Vanessa realized was that I had already delivered my coup de grace. The final documents had been filed, the last evidence submitted. By the time Eva took the stage for her rescheduled audition, the last pieces of my architectural revenge would slide perfectly into place. "Are you nervous?" I asked Eva the night before the performance. My daughter looked up from the piano, hands poised above the keys. "Not anymore. I know exactly what I'm capable of now." I smiled, recognizing my own newfound strength mirrored in her eyes. "Yes, I believe we both do." The day of Eva's rescheduled Juilliard audition dawned clear and bright. I helped her prepare with the precise care of someone assembling a delicate mechanism. Hairstyled elegantly, the perfectly pressed recital dress, a light breakfast to sustain her through the performance. "Your medication," I said, watching, as Eva swallowed the pills that now never left my direct possession. We arrived at Mercer Hall early, Eva warming up in a private room while I coordinated with security. The restraining order had been reinforced with specific instructions regarding today's event. If Patricia and Vanessa appeared, they would be intercepted immediately. "Ms. Mercer?" A security officer approached as audience members began filing into the hall. "We have a situation at the south entrance." I smiled thinly. Right on schedule. In the security office, monitors displayed Patricia and Vanessa attempting to talk their way past the checkpoint. Patricia resplendent in borrowed finery, Vanessa dressed with desperate attention to appearance despite the visible wear in her once designer outfit. "Let them in," I instructed, surprising the officer. "Seat them in the front row center section." "But the restraining order has exceptions I can authorize," I finished smoothly. "I want them where I can see them." As the hall filled, I took my place backstage with Eva, shielding her from the knowledge of who waited in the audience. This moment belonged to Eva alone. "You're going to be magnificent," I whispered, echoing my words from that fateful day months ago. Eva smiled, confidence radiating from her poised form. "I know." When Eva took the stage, the audience fell silent. Her presence commanded attention despite her youth. Back straight, head high, fingers poised with absolute certainty above the keys. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, the same piece from the disastrous first recital, filled the hall. But this time, each phrase built upon the last with flawless precision. Where before there had been collapse, now there was triumph. Eva's fingers flew across the keys, drawing gasps from the audience at passages of particular brilliance. I watched from the wings, eyes occasionally drifting to Patricia and Vanessa in the front row. Their expressions shifted from initial shock to growing horror as the piece progressed, as it became clear that their actions had failed to destroy this child's talent, had perhaps only tempered it into something even more formidable. As Eva completed the final movement, the audience erupted into standing ovation. The Juilliard representatives in the second row were already making notes, exchanging approving glances. Eva rose, curtsying gracefully before exiting stage left, into my waiting embrace. "That was perfect," I whispered fiercely. "Not quite," Eva admitted with a small smile, "but better than perfect. It was honest." As we prepared to return to the stage for the formal announcement, a commotion erupted in the hall. Patricia and Vanessa had left their seats, pushing toward the stage door against the security officer's attempts to intercept them. "Alexandra!" Patricia's voice carried clearly, desperation stripping away her cultivated dignity. "You have to listen to us. This has gone far enough." I stepped forward, positioning myself between Eva and the approaching women. Security officers flanked us, uncertain how to proceed given my earlier authorization. "This is neither the time nor the place," I said, my voice carrying with architectural precision. "When is the time?" Vanessa cried, mascara already tracking down her face. "You've taken everything. The trust, our reputations, our lives." The hall had gone silent, the audience riveted by the unfolding drama. The Juilliard representatives watched with raised eyebrows while parents clutched their children closer. "You took everything from us," Patricia hissed, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "Your father would be ashamed of what you've become." Something cold and clarifying washed through me. With perfect calm, I reached into my portfolio and extracted a sealed envelope, handing it to the nearest security officer. "Please give this to Charles Winters in the third row," I instructed. "He'll verify its authenticity." As Charles received the envelope, I turned back to my mother and sister. "3 months ago, I filed a petition with the district attorney's office," I announced, voice carrying throughout the now silent hall. "Complete with evidence of attempted murder through medication, tampering, decades of financial crimes, and systematic emotional abuse." Patricia's face drained of color. Vanessa swayed slightly, clutching my mother's arm. The DA declined to press charges on condition that full financial restitution be made and certain other conditions be met. I nodded toward Charles, who had opened the envelope and was now approaching with its contents. "Those conditions included public acknowledgement of your actions," I continued as Charles handed documents to Patricia. "The statement you're holding admits, in full detail, to every act committed against Eva and me over the past 15 years. It will be published in tomorrow's paper, posted to all social media accounts, and distributed to every member of your social circle." "We'll never sign this," Patricia whispered, though her hands trembled on the papers. "Then the DA has instructions to proceed with criminal charges," I replied simply. "The choice is yours, public humiliation or prison. Either way, you'll never harm my daughter again." Vanessa began to weep openly, all pretense abandoned. "You've destroyed us." "No," I corrected, gently. "You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided my child's life was worth less than your jealousy." I turned to the security officers. "Please escort them from the building after they've made their decision. My daughter and I have a celebration to attend." As Patricia and Vanessa were led away, Patricia rigid with fury, Vanessa collapsed in defeat. I returned to Eva's side. The Juilliard representatives approached, warm congratulations confirming what the standing ovation had already made clear. Later that evening, as we drove home from the celebration dinner, Eva reached for my hand. "They're really gone now, aren't they? For good?" I nodded, squeezing her fingers. "Yes. They can't hurt us anymore." "What happens to the house? Grandma's house, I mean." I smiled slightly. "Funny you should ask. I received notification this morning that it's being sold to cover their debts." I didn't mention that I'd arranged to purchase it anonymously through a shell corporation, or that demolition permits had already been filed. Where the house of my unhappy childhood had stood, I would build something new, something with light, and music and room to grow. The trust my father had left was more than enough to secure Eva's future and rebuild whatever we chose from the ashes of the past. "In their world, love was always conditional," I said softly, more to myself than to Eva. "In ours, it's worth everything I have." Eva leaned against my shoulder, the future stretching before us, unlimited, unburdened, and finally, completely, our own. The public confession was signed the following morning. Patricia and Vanessa, faced with the choice between humiliation and incarceration, chose the former. The statement appeared as promised in all major newspapers and across social media platforms, with an accompanying fund established to support young musicians with medical needs. Within days, the last of their social connections evaporated. The very people who had once courted their favor now crossed the street to avoid them. Country club memberships were revoked, charitable board positions eliminated, invitations rescinded. Mrs. Patricia Mercer called again, my assistant informed me one morning at the architectural firm. She insists it's about a personal matter that can't be discussed through intermediaries. "Refer her to Charles, as always," I replied, turning back to the renovation plans on my desk. The transformation of the family home was well underway, the oppressive dark wood and heavy curtains being replaced with open spaces and walls of windows to let in natural light. Eva's acceptance to Juilliard's youth program arrived with a personal note from the director, praising her extraordinary resilience and talent. Her piano teacher reported that she was advancing at twice her previous rate, freed from the subtle sabotage that had hindered her for years. 6 months after the confrontation at Mercer Hall, I received a report that Vanessa had relocated to a small apartment across town, taking a second job as a cashier to supplement her cosmetics counter income. The designer clothes had been sold, the jewelry pawned, the luxury lifestyle replaced by the day-to-day reality she had always despised. Patricia held out longer, stubbornly clinging to the remnants of her former life. She sold the remaining artwork, then the antique furniture, then finally her wedding ring, the last piece of jewelry she had refused to part with earlier. "The house closing is next week," Charles informed me during our monthly meeting. "She's requested additional time to remove her belongings." "Denied," I said without hesitation. The terms were clear. She has until Friday. Charles nodded, making a note. "There's one more thing. She's made another appeal to the trust board, claiming your actions constitute harassment and should trigger the same moral turpitude clause against you." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "They unanimously rejected it, of course. But she did manage to secure a small personal loan from an old friend. She's used it to rent a modest apartment not far from Vanessa's." I considered this information, picturing my mother in a small apartment, stripped of her designer clothes and social standing. The woman who had terrorized my childhood reduced to borrowing money to keep a roof over her head. "Is that all?" I asked. Charles hesitated. "There is one last thing. She sent this for Eva." He placed a small velvet box on the desk between us. Inside was a delicate gold locket, my grandmother's, one of the few genuine family heirlooms that had never been entrusted to me. She requested that Eva have it, regardless of your feelings toward her. I closed the box without comment and placed it in my desk drawer. Perhaps someday, when Eva was older, I would give it to her with the full context of its history. Or perhaps not. Some legacies weren't worth preserving. "Will there be anything else, Charles?" The elderly attorney studied me for a moment. "Just one question, if I may. Are you satisfied, Alexandra? Has justice been served?" I considered his question carefully. The women who had nearly killed my daughter now lived in apartments they could barely afford, working jobs they had once considered beneath them, socially isolated and financially ruined. The family home would soon be demolished, replaced by a structure of my own design. The trust funds they had taken for granted now supported children like Eva instead. "Justice is never truly complete," I replied finally. "But I've ensured they can never harm Eva again. That's enough." Later that week, I visited the family home one last time before demolition began. The rooms were empty now, echoing with memories of a childhood spent trying to be small enough, quiet enough, compliant enough to earn love that had always been conditional. In the grand foyer where my mother had hosted countless social events, I unfurled the architectural plans I'd created. A music school would stand here now, with scholarships for talented children and specialized support for those with medical needs. Ava's idea, enthusiastically approved by the trust board. Where there had been darkness, there would be light. Where there had been cruelty, there would be nurturing. Where there had been conditional love, there would be acceptance. My phone rang. Eva, calling from her piano lesson. "Mom, Mr. Abramson says I'm ready for the Mozart concerto. Can we celebrate tonight?" "Of course we can," I smiled, turning my back on the empty house and walking into the sunlight. "I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure watching from across the street. Patricia, standing perfectly still, staring at the house she would never enter again. Our eyes met briefly through the car window. I didn't slow down. Some people never change. But I had. And in that transformation lay a power that neither Patricia nor Vanessa could ever touch again. 1 year after Eva's triumphant Juilliard audition, we stood together watching the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Mercer School of Music. Where the family mansion had once loomed, an airy modern building now welcomed students from across the city. "It's perfect, Mom," Eva whispered, squeezing my hand as cameras flashed and the small crowd applauded. At 13, she had grown taller, more confident, her talent flourishing without the constant undercurrent of sabotage. "Your grandfather would have loved it," I told her, thinking of my father and the foresight that had armed me with the means to protect her. The trust that had once funded Patricia and Vanessa's extravagant lifestyle now provided scholarships for 40 students, including those with medical conditions similar to Eva's. The school's opening made the front page of the local newspaper, with photographs of Eva playing the inaugural recital on the Steinway grand piano in the main hall. I had given the reporter just enough of our story to make it compelling without revealing the full extent of Patricia and Vanessa's cruelty. The article mentioned only that the school had been built to honor my father's memory after family differences led to a change in the trust's management. Those differences had continued to play out in increasingly desperate ways over the past year. Patricia had filed 3 more appeals to the trust board, each more outlandish than the last. The final attempt included forged documents purporting to show my father had been mentally incompetent when establishing the second trust. Did she really think that would work? Eva asked when I explained why I'd spent the afternoon with the family attorneys. Desperation makes people reckless, I replied, remembering the look on Charles Winter's face as he presented the clumsily falsified documents. She's running out of options. Indeed, she was. The small loan that had secured Patricia's apartment had come due, and her friend had refused to extend it. The last I'd heard, she was moving in with Vanessa, the 2 women forced to share the cramped 1-bedroom apartment my sister could barely afford on her retail salary. Vanessa had fared no better. The makeup counter position had ended after multiple customer complaints about her imperious attitude. She now worked the cash register at a discount clothing store, selling poor imitations of the designer items she once took for granted. I received monthly reports from my private investigator, not out of vindictiveness but precaution. I needed to know if either woman showed signs of planning another attempt to harm Eva. So far, they seemed consumed with basic survival, their energy directed toward making rent rather than revenge. There's been a development, Charles informed me one afternoon in early spring. Patricia has applied for a position at the Mercer School of Music, administrative assistant in the front office. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. You must be joking. I'm afraid not. She used her maiden name, but the background check revealed her identity. She's quite desperate for employment, it seems. I considered this unexpected move. Did the hiring committee reject her immediately? They've left the decision to you, as founder and director of the trust. The irony was almost too perfect. Patricia Mercer, who had spent her life arranging others into her preferred hierarchy, now seeking permission from me to answer phones and file paperwork. Tell them to schedule an interview, I said finally. I'll handle it personally. Charles raised an eyebrow. Are you certain that's wise? Absolutely not, I admitted. But I find myself curious. The interview was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon when Eva would be at her advanced theory class. I arranged for it to take place in my office, the space I'd designed myself when the school was built. All clean lines and natural light, with Eva's first student award displayed prominently on the wall. Patricia arrived exactly 15 minutes early, dressed in a conservative suit that had seen better days. Her hair was simply styled, her jewelry conspicuously absent except for a plain wedding band. She had aged dramatically in the past year, deep lines etched around her mouth and eyes. Mrs. Winters? I greeted her formally, using her maiden name as she had on the application. Please, have a seat. She sat stiffly on the edge of the chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The practiced social grace was still there, but beneath it I could see the trembling of genuine desperation. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she said, her voice carefully modulated. I appreciate the opportunity to interview for the position. Let's be clear, I replied, setting her resume aside. We both know who you are. What I don't know is why you're here. Patricia swallowed hard. I need the job. I have skills that would be valuable to your organization. I'm a hard worker, detail-oriented, and I have extensive experience managing complex social calendars. All true, I acknowledged. You're also the woman who helped conceal the fact that my sister tampered with my daughter's life-saving medication. The woman who told Eva that her near-death experience was simply due to pushing herself too hard. The color drained from Patricia's face, but she didn't look away. I've lost everything, Alexandra. My home, my standing, my dignity. Vanessa and I can barely afford to eat. Would it satisfy you to know I'm suffering? Because I am. Your suffering was never my goal, I told her honestly. My goal was to ensure you could never harm Eva again. The consequences you're experiencing now are the direct result of your own actions. Patricia's composure finally cracked. What do you want from me? A full confession? Public self-flagellation? I signed your statement. I've been humiliated in front of everyone I know. Isn't that enough? I studied the woman who had been the architect of so much unhappiness in my life. The woman who had chosen, again and again, to enable cruelty rather than protect the vulnerable. What I want, I said finally, is something you're incapable of giving. Genuine remorse. Not for being caught, not for losing your lifestyle, but for the harm you caused. For prioritizing Vanessa's jealousy over Eva's well-being. For treating your granddaughter as a threat rather than a child to be cherished. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You've become quite self-righteous, haven't you? Sitting in your perfect office in your perfect building, funded by money you stole from us. Money my father left specifically to protect us from you, I corrected. And yes, I've changed. I'm no longer the daughter who sought your approval, at any cost. I'm a mother who will do anything to protect her child. Something you should understand, given how far you went to protect Vanessa. Vanessa was fragile, Patricia whispered. She needed me. And I didn't? I asked softly. Eva didn't? For a moment, something like genuine regret flickered across Patricia's face. Then it hardened into the familiar mask of resentment. Are you going to give me the job or not? I closed her file. I think we both know the answer to that question. Patricia gathered her purse with shaking hands. You'll regret this, Alexandra. You can't keep punishing us forever. This isn't punishment, Mother. This is consequence. And the choice was always yours. It still is. I watched her walk out, back rigid with the last vestige of pride she could muster. Once her disapproval would have devastated me. Now it barely registered as a ripple in the calm certainty of my new life. That evening, Eva and I celebrated her acceptance to an international summer music program in Vienna. Over dinner, she noticed my distraction. Is everything okay, Mom? You seem somewhere else tonight. I smiled, pushing thoughts of Patricia aside. Just thinking about how proud I am of you, and how lucky I am to be your mother. Later, as Eva practiced in our living room, the music flowing through our home like light, I opened a small box that had arrived by courier that afternoon. Inside was my grandmother's locket, returned without a note. I recognized it as Patricia's final surrender, the last piece of family connection severed by her own hand. I closed the box and set it aside. Some inheritances weren't worth passing on. Eva would forge her own legacy, untainted by the patterns of conditional love and jealousy that had defined my childhood. Outside, I could see the lights of the city where Patricia and Vanessa now lived in obscurity, stripped of everything they had once valued. Their world had shrunk to the dimensions of that small apartment, while ours expanded with each new opportunity. Each new achievement, each day lived without the shadow of their cruelty. They had sought to teach Eva humility by bringing her low. Instead, they had taught me the power of standing firm, of protecting what mattered most, of building something beautiful from the ruins of the past. In the end, that was the most complete. Revenge of all, not their downfall, but our rise. Not their suffering, but our joy. Not what they had lost, but what Eva and I had finally, irrevocably, gained. The freedom to become exactly who we were meant to be.